In the vast sea of clouds, the black-winged condor shuttled through the clouds and mist at an extremely fast speed. In the vast sea of clouds, the black-winged condor shuttled through the clouds and mist at an extremely fast speed. On the back of black-winged condor's massive body, there was a group of people. Some were sitting and some were standing. The island lord of Eastern Deity Island was dressed in all red, standing in front, emanating a majestic elegance. Baimu stood quietly behind her. This time the fact that her master agreed to come along with him had shocked Baimu. Not only that, but her master even claimed that Eastern Deity Island might be handed over to Yi Futian in the future. This was holding Yi Futian in the highest esteem. Yi Futian sat quietly behind them, with Xia Qingyuan sitting on his left side, while Beigong Ao and Beigong Shuang were on his right. Zi Feng sat alone in front near the head of the little condor. Occasionally, the little condor would tease her, but Zi Feng had no interest in engaging him. Such a group of people may seem like a strange combination, but they were interacting harmoniously. At the moment, Yi Futian was drinking with Beigong Ao. Of course, the wine was brought from Eastern Deity Island, precious delicacies with the whey hidden in the wine. One would be losing out to pass it over. Baimu, come and have a few drinks with us, Yi Futian said to Baimu, who was standing there. Baimu looked at Yi Futian, then at her master in front of her. Since the master was here, she still had to pay attention to her manners. If she was no longer the only one to accompany Yi Futian, she might be able to be a little more casual. Island Lord, the journey is long. Why not come over and have a few drinks? Yi Futian called out. The Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island turned her head and looked at Yi Futian. Yi Futian smiled and said, "The wine is from Eastern Deity Island. If you don't drink it, then there will be more for me." Baimu was somewhat speechless. This guy really didn't hesitate to speak his mind. On Eastern Deity Island, no one dared to speak to her master like that. Her master seldom revealed herself, and she was not fond of words. However, she was authoritative and uncompromising, nonetheless, extremely decisive in her action. There were no simple folks who could cultivate to the pinnacle of Renhuang. Their mind, means, and courage could not be affected by ordinary folks. The island lord walked over to Yi Futian and sat down in front of him. Yi Futian smiled and took out a wine glass to pour for her. He then raised his glass and said, "Now we are all one family, and addressing you as Island Lord sounds way too formal. The Island Lord is older than me and a descendant of the Supreme Deity. As half of a disciple of the Supreme Deity, how about addressing you as senior sister in the future?" Next to her, Baimu was dumbfounded. If Yi Futian was to call her master senior sister, then, did this mean she would have to call him Uncle Master? Island Lord now became senior sister. This guy was so truly audacious. Beigong Ao lowered his head and smiled slyly. This kid was indeed quite a character, resorting to all these relations, such as this senior sister business. This relationship suddenly got a lot closer, and because the other party held Yi Futian in high regard, most likely they would not refuse him. Sure enough, the Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island nodded and said, "It's up to you." Then it's settled. Yi Futian smiled and said, "I, as the junior brother, should drink first." As he spoke, he picked up the wine glass and drank the wine in one gulp. Seeing his action, the Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island also raised the glass and followed suit. "We are no longer in Eastern Deity Island, so we won't address you as Island Lord anymore. How about Goddess Donglai?" "Please," Beigong Ao said, raising the glass with both hands. The Island Lord was a descendant of Supreme Deity Donglai, with the last name Donglai. Therefore, Goddess Donglai was a fitting title for her. Goddess Donglai had another glass and asked Beigong Ao, "Why do you choose to follow him?" Beigong Ao was now in the 8th realm and had great opportunities at Eastern Deity Island. She wanted to know why Beigong Ao did not choose to return to his own continent to be number one, but choose to follow someone of a younger generation. Even Goddess Donglai is willing to accompany him to come out for trials. "What reason do I have not to?" Beigong Ao said with a smile. It was as if he didn't say anything, yet everything was said. The reason was simple. Why would Goddess Donglai be willing to accompany him? Then Beigong Ao would have no reason not to do the same. The two were only one level apart, but there was, in fact, a huge gap between them. They were not at the same level, whether in status or strength. Goddess Donglai nodded. She understood that very well now. Sister, the memory I got from the Supreme Deity was a little fragmented. What happened back then? The other side went against Supreme Deity, but why leave Eastern Deity Island untouched? Yi Futian asked. My father had some friends back then. The other party had done some unjustifiable deeds, and couldn't go to the extreme and was subjected to some restraints, said Goddess Donglai. Supreme Deity Donglai was a master-level top alchemist, with many friends and people who owed him favors, and some of them were powerful individuals. Yi Futian nodded. But such danger has always existed. This hidden danger was the reason why Eastern Deity Island had endured this for many years silently, avoiding any outings, just to accumulate strength? Endure? Accumulate strength? Goddess Donglai glanced at him, and there seemed to be a self-deprecating smile on that stunningly beautiful face. I guess you are half right. Not enduring in silence, but we dared not leave, dared not be visible. As for enduring in silence and accumulating our strength, it is probably just some wishful thinking on our part. Even if we accumulated enough power to sweep all of Penglai, it is meaningless. If we cannot produce a top figure, no one would pay any attention to us. Today's Eastern Deity Island is unworthy. As she spoke, she raised the glass and drank up by herself. Her tone seemed to be tinged with some sadness. Eastern Deity Island was unworthy. What others perceived as silent endurance was actually Eastern Deity Island's wishful thinking. They did want to save their strength and improve themselves, but that made very little sense in reality. Unless there could be a peak existence one day. So, Yi Futian listened to what the others said and started to understand a little better. So, there you have it, Goddess Donglai said. Yi Futian had given a glimmer of hope for Eastern Deity Island. On Yi Futian, she saw the potential for him to become a giant. Therefore, she was even willing to give him the entire Eastern Deity Island and accompany him for trials and cultivation. There was only one goal, and that was to help Yi Futian reach the top. At Eastern Deity Island, she had observed Yi Futian's behavior and found that he was good to those around him. If she could assist him and turn over all of Eastern Deity Island to him, he would at least have a sense of belonging toward Eastern Deity Island. Whether he would be willing to take revenge on behalf of Eastern Deity Island was something else. Still, if he climbed to the top, Eastern Deity Island would be freed and would no longer be living in fear of moving around at will or being too visible and causing trouble. She had named Yi Futian as the second island lord, and she was willing to go so far as to abdicate and make way for Yi Futian in the future. Of course, it was all for a purpose. Handing Eastern Deity Island to him for preservation. This was the foundation left by her father, and she didn't want to see it disintegrate one day and became the dust of history. If you reach the top one day, I will give you Eastern Deity Island. I hope you can accept it. Goddess Donglai's beautiful eyes were looking directly at Yi Futian. Only at this moment did Yi Futian finally understood her intention. Eastern Deity Island was not enduring in silence, but it was the fear of being too visible. To teach the world of opportunity of the Great Path was only for recruitment purposes. Even if the Eastern Deity Island had recruited someone, not much could be changed. At the very least, someone like Jiang Jiuming would never agree to join Eastern Deity Island. Yi Futian was an exception. Perhaps it was fortuitous for Eastern Deity Island that such a person was sent to them. Everything was a destined coincidence. Very well, I accept. Yi Futian nodded and made a toast to Goddess Donglai. His feeling toward Eastern Deity Island was very good, as they had gotten rid of the Jun family for him. Even as he partook the elixir and swallowed the divine tree, they had never threatened him, including those alchemy masters who were really quite lovely to him. Eastern Deity Island had always treated him with honesty, so it was not like he was influenced by those beautiful goddesses and the island lord. After having received so many favors, it was so that he would take over Eastern Deity Island in the future. He had no reason to refuse such a request. Goddess Donglai nodded. Yi Futian's promise was much relief to her, so she replied softly, "Thank you." "I should be the one to thank you," Yi Futian said. Senior sister, where are you planning on taking me this time? The divine prefecture was vast. With Goddess Donglai as his guide on this trip, he need not worry about anything. Goddess Donglai was more familiar with the divine prefecture than him. It's to pave the way for you. Goddess Donglai looked into the distance and whispered. She agreed to accept Yi Futian's invitation this time because she had already given the matter a lot of consideration. Yi Futian's appearance may attract the attention of their enemies, and if his performance was too dazzling, he might be in danger. Therefore, she immediately agreed to go along with Yi Futian. On this trip, she was going to take Yi Futian to the main continent in Donghua domain, where there were old friends of her father. She intended to pave the way for Yi Futian so that if he were ever in real trouble in the future, there would be people who could protect him. Yi Futian didn't ask much, just nodded casually, while several of them continued to drink. Below the clouds and fog, they could see parts of the continents from time to time. They were passing through continents, one after another, and met many other cultivators on the way. Basically, these cultivators were all existences of the Renhuang realm so that they could travel over continents. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1954, Alchemy Emperor. Chapter 1954, Alchemy Emperor. Before they knew it, they had been on the road for many days. Although it was a little monotonous at times, they had a few drinks here and there and chatted. Overall, it was a pleasant and easy time. One more cluster of continents, and we will arrive at our destination, Goddess Donglai said while standing in front, looking into the distance. Continental cluster? Yi Futian whispered. Goddess Donglai responded, still looked forward. This vast area has a cluster of continents, all on the same massive plate, interconnected with one another, surrounding the main continent of the divine prefecture, the Donghua domain, Dongshao continent. In actuality, this entire cluster of continents lies within the area of Dongshao continent, and almost all of them can be considered as a subsidiary of the Dongshao continent. This plate is self-contained but separated from each other. Goddess Donglai continued, memories in her eyes. It was as if she was recalling a time long ago when she had come here with her father. She had stayed in Dongshao continent for some years, so she seemed to have a lot of knowledge about this vast and endless plate of land. The black-winged condor spread its wings and traveled fast over the tumbling clouds. They could see many cultivators because there was a continent right beneath them, and many cultivators were also traveling in the sky. After coming to the plate belonging to Dongshao continent, they could perceive that there were now many more cultivators, and from time to time they encountered others who were traveling in the void. As they continued moving forward again, they came to the sky above the mainland's central area. Goddess Donglai's divine consciousness diffused toward the sky below. Those brilliant eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the void and looked into the sky below and said, "Down." A flash went through Black-Winged Condor's eyes, and Yi Futian transmitted a thought to him. Suddenly, his body went into a dive and swooped down, headed toward this continent. Senior sister, didn't we just reach the outer plate of Dongshao continent? Yi Futian asked. To visit a friend. Strictly speaking, he can be considered as half of a senior brother to you, said Goddess Donglai. Yi Futian, a little taken aback, said, in the memory of the supreme deity, this disciple does not seem to have existed. Could it have been just a fragment? Not exactly a disciple, but someone he had instructed, so it counts as half of a disciple. His situation was different from yours, said Goddess Donglai. Understood. Yi Futian nodded and didn't inquire further. He could guess a thing or two. It must have been a cultivator who was instructed by the supreme deity Donglai, so that even though it was not a real master-disciple relationship, he was considered a half-disciple. It seemed that supreme deity Donglai had spent a lot of time in this area. The reason for Goddess Donglai's journey here seemed to have something to do with this. They might have quite a few acquaintances at this place. The black-winged condor quickly broke through the clouds and mist and flew at a lower altitude, with a very clear vision of the buildings below. That tallest tower in front, Goddess Donglai said, and the black-winged condor flapped his wings fiercely, his body turned into a dark stream of light, moving in that direction. Soon, they came to the periphery of this building complex. Except for that tallest sky-reaching tower, many ancient temples were towering in the surroundings, like the complex of a royal palace, with a solemn atmosphere. Tower of the Alchemy Emperor. Yi Futian glanced at the tallest sky-reaching tower, with 3 elegant characters engraved on it. They seemed to contain the power of the Great Path and were extremely eye-catching. The Tower of the Alchemy Emperor seemed to be the holy land for alchemy. Below the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor, it seemed that many people had gathered here, as if holding a banquet. A middle-aged man was sitting on the main seat on the stairs in front of tower, wearing a robe of purple and gold. From him, a strong aura of mighty and great authority could be detected as he conversed animatedly with everyone around him. But at this moment, he seemed to have perceived something as he raised his head and looked toward the void. Those eyes penetrated the void directly and locked onto the position of the black-winged condor. At that instant, the black-winged condor suddenly seemed to be subjected to the Great Path's terrifying coercion. His body swooped down as if out of his own control. However, the pressure disappeared instantly as the middle-aged man saw the person on the back of the black-winged condor. He stood up, and his eyes fell on the foremost figure on the back of the black-winged condor, Goddess Donglai. The pressure on the black-winged condor decreased sharply, but his body continued to dive downward nonetheless and came to the place of the banquet. In an instant, the eyes of many cultivators fell on the newcomers, a little surprised. They had swooped down from the sky and crashed their party. How rude was that? However, none of them spoke. Judging from their host's movements and eyes, they seemed to be acquainted with one another. In the next moment, a smile appeared on the middle-aged man's face. He smiled and said, "After such a long time, I didn't expect Junior Sister to be able to join us." Junior Sister? Many people looked interested. Everyone present knew that Alchemy Emperor was not taught by any master. If there was anyone close to it, it could only be the master alchemist himself, Supreme Being Donglai, who had instructed him many years ago. The Alchemy Emperor had always held him in the highest regard and referred to him as teacher, and paid him the respect of a disciple. So, this Junior Sister? Could it be her? "It's been a long time," Goddess Donglai said. Yi Futian watched quietly. It seemed that this half-a-disciple of Supreme Deity Donglai was the top figure in this continent and had created the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor. Many of the guests at this banquet had strong cultivation skills, with quite a few of them being Upper Renhuang, and the aura of that middle-aged man was especially tyrannical. Judging by his perception, he should be a cultivator of the 9th realm at the peak of Renhuang. "I didn't expect Junior Sister to be here. Come and take a seat," Alchemy Emperor said as he stood up and walked down from his seat to greet her personally. Goddess Donglai and her party landed and moved forward under everyone's gaze. At the banquet, many people's attention was focused over there, and someone said, "Alchemy Emperor, aren't you going to make an introduction?" "Very well." Alchemy Emperor smiled and nodded. He led Goddess Donglai to his side and faced everyone, saying, "This is my Junior Sister. When my Master Supreme Deity Donglai was on his journey, I was fortunate enough to have met him, all of which made today possible. No doubt that all of you have heard what happened afterward." Indeed. Everyone trembled in their hearts, knowing that the descendant of Supreme Being Donglai had actually left Eastern Deity Island and came here. Whatever happened at the time had caused a great disturbance. Although Eastern Deity Island and Penglai continent were far away, they had all heard about the incident, and at the time, this continental plate was also involved. However, it was still unclear why the descendant of Supreme Being Donglai had come out from their lair this time. Greetings to Goddess Donglai. Many people stood up and bowing with their hands together, acting quite politely. As the progeny of a known clan, Goddess Donglai was a top figure of the Renhuang realm, even if the fortune of the clan had waned considerably. Goddess Donglai nodded in return, as her gaze drifted to Yi Futian, who was next to her. "Senior brother, allow me to introduce someone to you, Yi Lionian." Alchemy Emperor looked at Yi Futian curiously and saw that his temperament was quite extraordinary. He concluded that he must be a genius talent. He nodded slightly at Yi Futian. "One look, and one knows that our little brother is no ordinary folks." Yi Lionian greets senior brother. Yi Futian bowed slightly for the Alchemy Emperor, which stunned the alchemy emperor so that he looked at Yi Futian and then at goddess Donglai. He is considered to be an heir of my father's, goddess Donglai said. Master has an heir? Alchemy emperor sounded surprised. Yi Futian looked so very young, and supreme being Donglai had fallen for many years. Even then, before his fall, no one had ever heard of him excepting a last disciple. Father left some inheritance and was inherited by Lionian, so indeed he is father's successor, goddess Donglai said. Alchemy emperor was a little surprised, but still, he nodded. I didn't expect that I would have a junior brother. With junior sister and junior brother here, I will have someone to talk to, and I can have a good exchange of alchemy techniques with junior brother. The people below were very surprised that the supreme being Donglai had actually left an inheritance. Now, the inheritance had been inherited by this man. Was it the art of alchemy? How dare I exchange with senior brother? I'm afraid it is I who need to learn from my brother. Yi Futian's demeanor was humble and polite. Goddess Donglai glanced at him and didn't speak. Brother Yi is young, but if you could inherit from the supreme being, you must have outstanding qualities. Your alchemy techniques must also be extraordinary, perhaps not much less than the alchemy emperor. A young man below smiled and commented. Supreme being Donglai now has an heir. It is indeed a happy event. The old man next to him smiled and added, I wonder how many grades of alchemy are you capable of now? The old man smiled gently, but his eyes were filled with brilliance. Yi Futian smiled and looked at the other. He replied, I am just beginning to dabble in the arts of alchemy. I dared not speak of alchemy, and I need to learn more from senior brother. The old man nodded slightly. You are too humble. Even if you are just at the beginning, you have started higher than most. With the alchemy emperor's guidance, your accomplishments are to be expected. Let's be seated. Alchemy emperor seemed to be quite pleased as he was full of smiles. He had seats prepared for Yi Futian and his party, which were arranged directly next to his. This demonstrated that the alchemy emperor's closeness with goddess Donglai and the others. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1955. Traveling Together. Chapter 1955. Traveling together, Yi Futian and his people sat down, following which the many virtuosos of the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor also took their seats. Actually, today's banquet was meant for the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor. I did not expect you would be here too. It's such a coincidence. A few days later, I will be bringing some of the practitioners here along with me to the Dongshao continent. Why don't you join us? The Alchemy Emperor smiled and said as he sat down. On our journey this time, we definitely will be paying that person a visit. The Donglai goddess nodded her head slightly. Naturally, she knew who that person was. This was her goal for traveling to the Dongshao continent. Yi Futian represented the future of the Eastern Deity Island, and it was unfortunate that the Eastern Deity Island had a powerful enemy seeking revenge. She had to do something. It is really a fortunate coincidence this time. You came at the right time. If the senior knew that our teacher had an heir, he would definitely be joyous. The Alchemy Emperor smiled and said, that figure was friends with his teacher in the past, and they had a very close relationship. When his teacher passed away, the person felt deeply regretful. If he could see their teacher's heir, he would probably be pleased. I came to find senior for this matter indeed, the Donglai goddess said. I did not want to bring Junior Lionian there myself. The Alchemy Emperor let out a quizzical expression and looked at the Donglai goddess with some curiosity. The Donglai goddess continued, Senior, you also know what his personality is like. When has he ever cared about the superficial rules of the world? Of course, with father's position, I won't have any trouble getting to meet him. However, I do not wish for that to be the reason that they could meet. Since we have met coincidentally here, then I can only ask to borrow a slot from Senior. The Alchemy Emperor immediately understood her meaning. It seemed that she had great confidence in Yi Futian. As for the personality of that senior, he, of course, understood a little too. If Yi Futian was not exceptional enough and only relied on his status as the heir when he met the senior, Even if he were willing to provide guidance, he would probably not believe that Yi Futian was deserving of the inheritance of the supreme deity Donglai. Since the Donglai goddess said this, she meant for Yi Futian to first prove himself worthy before meeting the senior. However, that would only succeed provided Yi Futian was outstanding. Otherwise, he would just be eclipsed by all the other prodigies and appear all too common. The rest of the people at the banquet tensed a little upon hearing the Donglai goddess's words. Even though they had considered that this might be a possibility since the Donglai goddess had said it herself that she wanted Yi Futian to also travel to the Dongxiao continent. This meant that Yi Futian was going to take up a slot and become part of them. With the Dongxiao continent as the center continent tile, it was natural that the surrounding continents would look up to the Dongxiao continent. Furthermore, the good friend of the supreme deity Donglai was a truly exceptional figure from the Dongxiao continent. He stood at the pinnacle even among the extremely powerful, and on this continent, he had an incomparably high status. Every year, each continent would send their prodigies to the Dongxiao continent in the hopes that they would be able to cultivate at the cultivation court that he was at. Leave this matter to me. The alchemy emperor nodded his head in agreement. He could still decide on this matter. However, whether Yi Futian could get to meet him without using his status as the disciple of a goddess of the supreme deity Donglai was another matter. Since it had already been decided, everything else would depend on Yi Futian himself. Since our little friend Yi is the disciple of the supreme deity Donglai, why is there a need to go through all this trouble? With such an important status, you could meet with the senior directly, an elderly man seated below suggested. Well, there's no harm. He can treat it as an experience, the alchemy emperor replied. Hearing the reply, the elderly man kept silent. Since Emperor Yi obtained the inheritance from the supreme deity, surely he must have exceptional talent in alchemy. Even though Emperor Yi humbly claims to only be a beginner, but if he were truly common, how could he have obtained the supreme deity's inheritance? A middle-level Renhuang smiled and asked. Today, among us all, there are quite a few people who are alchemists, seeking guidance from the alchemy emperor all along. Since we have been fated to meet, could we ask Emperor Yi for advice on the path of alchemy? Yi Futian looked toward the person who spoke. It seemed like he was inquisitive about his alchemy skills. Who would not be curious about the heir of the supreme deity Donglai? Even the Donglai goddess did not inherit her father's position. Rather, it was an outsider who did it. I have mentioned before that I have only just started down the path of alchemy. It was only recently that I even began trying my hand at refining elixirs. I don't have much talent in this aspect. Regarding how I obtained the inheritance, it was probably sheer luck, Yi Futian replied, smiling. There was no need for him to show his true ability in alchemy. It would only cause him more trouble. Emperor Yi, there is no need to be overly humble, someone said with a smile. Since the Donglai goddess brought Yi Futian from such a remote place to join the Dongxiao continent, there was no way Yi Futian lacked in talent or strength. I am speaking only the truth, it's not that I'm humble. Furthermore, seated before me today are so many virtuosos. How could I possibly be more skilled than you? I would only be embarrassing myself, Yi Futian replied with a smile. He truly believed that his potential in alchemy was quite common and that there was nothing exceptional about it. As for showing off his alchemy skills here, he never practiced alchemy casually. In the past, when he refined elixirs, he did so because he had a practical need for the elixirs. Showing off his alchemy skills was meaningless to him. Hearing Yi Futian's words, everyone understood that it was probably impossible to have him practice alchemy in front of them. This man hid his ability very well. They wondered just how skilled he was. Alright, even though I originally arranged this gathering for you all, since my junior sister has coincidentally arrived, I shall not hold you back any further. In a few days, let's head towards the Dongxiao continent together, the alchemy emperor said. In fact, he was already hinting that he would like to end the gathering and for them to leave. Everyone certainly understood and respected his wishes, and one person after another got up to leave. Before taking their leave, several people still glanced at Yi Futian once more. They were full of curiosity about this heir to the supreme deity Donglai. After the crowd left, the alchemy emperor also rose and said, "I'll show you the way to the pavilion." You can rest there today." The Donglai goddesses also rose and followed behind the alchemy emperor. Apart from them, there were a couple of the alchemy emperor's disciples. They were also staring at the Donglai goddess and Yi Futian. However, they all knew their place and kept their mouths shut, not saying anything. They only followed silently. "Since the outsiders are no longer around, can you tell me the truth? This time you decided against using teacher's status to get Yi Futian to meet with the old senior. How confident are you that by taking this route, Yi Futian would succeed?" The alchemy emperor asked. 100%, the Donglai goddess replied, causing the alchemy emperor to halt for a moment. 100%? He thought. This meant that even if Yi Futian solely relied on himself, he could definitely still make it to the side of the old senior and cultivate with his guidance. With that accomplished, if he revealed his identity in the end, it would be a nice surprise for the senior. The alchemy emperor nodded his head seriously. "Since you trust Yi Futian so much, I am suddenly a little excited. Junior Yi, since you have obtained teacher's inheritance, I hope you can inherit his position as well." "I'll try my best," Yi Futian replied. The alchemy emperor did not say anything else and continued casually chatting with the Donglai goddess. A couple of days later, an entire legion of practitioners departed majestically. This time, their numbers increased quite a bit. They were all headed towards the same destination, the divine prefecture, Dongshao continent. This was one of the main continents. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1956, Wandu. Chapter 1956. Wandu. The Dongshao continent was one of the strongest and most prosperous main continents in the entire Donghua domain, and it was a member of the 7 continents. There were countless powerful factions in the Dongshao continent. A place like the Penglai continent was nothing extraordinary in the entire Dongshao continent. Here, there were countless families and clans with deep historical roots. Among the numerous factions, the one that stood above all was undoubtedly the Wangshan Watchtower. The name, Wangshan Watchtower, originated from a watchtower. In the past, there were 2 people who drank wine at the top of the watchtower while trying to diagnose each other's vitalities, and thus the name Wangshan Watchtower arose. In the present day, the Wangshan Watchtower no longer referred to just that one watchtower. Rather, it was the name of the most powerful faction on the Dongshao continent. Located within it was the Millet Emperor Cultivation Court, the sacred ground of cultivation that countless practitioners were hoping to get into. At that moment, in the air above the Dongshao continent, a row of people was traveling majestically. They were Yi Futian's group of people. Apart from them, the alchemy emperor and his followers were also there. Traveling together, their combined numbers were huge. From beyond the veil-like clouds, Yi Futian cast his glance downwards and saw tower after tower standing straight up. They were countless ancient palaces and divine pavilions. They were, however, not even in the main city of the Dongshao continent. This was just a city in a remote region in the continent, but even then, it boasted a strong force. Renhuangs were extremely common and could be found everywhere. The divine prefectures was immeasurably vast. Even the Penglai continent alone had above 1,000 continents surrounding it. One could expect that the Dongshao continent, one of the main continents in the Donghua domain, would have gathered numerous virtuosos from the entire Donghua domain. Practitioners who had great strength would naturally flock towards places that were even stronger still. Naturally, this positive reinforcement strengthened the forces of the Dongshao continent. After they passed many cities, a mountain range appeared below them. It appeared strange and dangerous at the same time, and from within the range exuded a terrifying aura. Along the thousands of kilometers of mountain range, one could vaguely spot a cluster of pavilions. Obviously, there were people living there. "Should we take a detour?" someone asked the alchemy emperor. They all knew where they were. Within the Dongshao continent, the extremely powerful were located in various places. Right where they were was the Dragon Submission Mountain Range. In this mountain range, there was a villa located within it. The reason behind the name of this Dragon Submission Mountain Range was that even a real dragon had to crouch low in submission if it were to pass through this area. There is no need, the Alchemy Emperor replied. He was acquaintances with a few masters of the Dragon Submission Mountain range. Nothing should go awry if they just passed through the area. As they were traversing the space above the mountain range, an overbearing aura shot straight into the heavens, and the roar of beasts reverberated through the entire space, accompanied by the howl of a dragon. Unexpectedly, a divine dragon at the Demon Emperor stage rose into the air, accompanied by various vicious beasts. Someone stood on the Demon Emperor, and his gaze swept across the group as he asked, "Who are you?" "An old friend from the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor. We would like to pass through this area and hope you can be agreeable to our request." The Alchemy Emperor had an ethereal air about him. His voice permeated the entire mountain range and reached below him. In response, wisps of divine consciousness swept upwards from below. Futian could distinctly feel a number of tendrils of divine consciousness descending upon and sweeping across him. "Ah, so it's my old friend who has come. Why don't you come down and take a seat?" A strong voice echoed out. A solemn-looking middle-aged man floated into the air. He had a stocky build and gave off a very dominant aura. "Alchemy Emperor, where's your sense of brotherhood? How can you not stay here for a few days when you are already here?" A couple of silhouettes rose into the air again. They all exuded a terrifying aura. Futian sensed that this mountain range actually had 3 level 9 virtuosos. It seemed that there were many terrifyingly strong virtuosos hidden in this Dragon Submission Mountain range. The Dongxiao continent was indeed a main continent. Even just casually passing by, one could encounter such a strong force. From this, though, one could also tell just how high the status of a powerful alchemist was. The practitioners of the Dragon Submission Mountain range were all rather friendly towards the Alchemy Emperor. There is a Dragon Submission Villa in the Dragon Submission Mountain range, and in it lived 3 lords of the villa. They are all well versed in the art of beast taming. The Donglai goddess telepathically introduced the people they encountered to Futian. Futian nodded his head lightly. It seemed that even though the Donglai goddesses had always isolated themselves on the eastern deity island, they had never cut off communication with the outside world. In fact, it was also possible that she headed out frequently. He glanced at the beasts again. They were all Demon Emperor levels. The specialty of the Dragon Submission Villa was in beast taming, but in this aspect, there might not be many people who were more skilled than he was. This time, we are rushing for time to head towards Wangde. So, we won't be stopping here. Next time when the chance arises, I will pay you a visit again, the Alchemy Emperor said. The land of Wangdu, also known as Wang City, was the largest city in the Dongxiao continent. Its name was derived from the Wangshan watchtower located inside. In the past, Wangdu was not even among the top 10 cities in the Dongxiao continent. However, due to the influence of the Wangshan watchtower, Wangdu was able to develop rapidly, and gradually it rose to become the top city in the entire Dongxiao continent. That's right too, the villa lords nodded. Since that's the case, then we shan't hold you back anymore. Just as nice, there are quite a few juniors in the villa who want to take a look at the outside world. Alchemy Emperor, how would you like to bring along a few of them and show them the world? As he spoke, he turned his head to look at the row of people behind him and said, "Didn't you all want to go to Wangdu? You can learn a little from your senior, the Alchemy Emperor, on the way there." A few people walked up. They all had an extraordinary aura about them and were all Renhuang-level practitioners. Bowing slightly to the Alchemy Emperor, they said, "Greetings to Senior Alchemy Emperor." Futian looked towards them. These people were really shrewd. They were all Renhuang practitioners already. Surely there was no need for someone to babysit them? They were using it as an excuse. Their main purpose was to build a relationship with the Alchemy Emperor. After all, making an acquaintance with an alchemy grandmaster can only be beneficial. All right, the Alchemy Emperor nodded. Thanks for the trouble then. The villa lords expressed their gratitude. Nah, we are just traveling together. It won't be troublesome in the least bit, the Alchemy Emperor replied casually. The villa lords of the Dragon Submission Villa were all at the 9th level. In the entire Dongxiao continent, this could already be considered one of the top-tier factions. He certainly understood that there was no need for him to take care of them. We will leave now. All right. The other party nodded. Please. As he finished speaking, he looked at the few practitioners from the villa and said, remember to learn as much as you can from your senior. Understood. The practitioners nodded their heads quickly. The alchemy emperor and his entourage once again departed. This time, not only were they joined by a few more people from the dragon submission villa and their mounts, which were also all demon emperors. Among them, a youth cloaked in black was riding a black dragon, exuding a terrifying aura. The black dragon's huge eyes turned towards the black-winged condor below Futian. Although it was completely uninterested in the condor, when the dragon looked up at Zifeng, curiosity seemed to vaguely form in its eyes. Apparently, it had discovered that Zifeng was also a demon. While they were traveling, the practitioners from the villa introduced themselves. As they chatted casually, they got more familiar with each other. Among them, the key persons were the three practitioners who were the descendants of the three villa lords, namely Lin Qiu, Han Tai, and Leng Yi. Lin Qiu's aura had a tinge of the splendor of demons. He had exceptional features and was the son of the eldest villa lord. He was a middle-level Renhuang. Wearing a robe, he appeared to have an extraordinary air about him. And these few seniors here are? Lin Qiu asked as he looked at the Penglai goddess and Beigong Ao behind the alchemy emperor. He was a little curious about them. In particular, the Penglai goddess gave them an extraordinary feeling. She looked gorgeous and noble, and she had a fearsome aura about her. She's my junior, the alchemy emperor answered without further elaboration. Greetings to my senior. Hearing the alchemy emperor's words, Lin Qiu bowed towards the Penglai goddess, who nodded her head lightly in response. He then turned his glance towards Futian and saw that this white-haired youth was very relaxed and casual. Futian was drinking his wine quietly at the side and appeared to be extremely carefree. The fragrance of wine wafted past Lin Qiu, causing a pleasant feeling to well up within him. He guessed that this white-haired Renhuang was a disciple of the alchemy emperor's junior. However, it was also rude to ask about everyone's identity, so he smiled and said, that is some good wine. If you don't mind, can I try a cup? Futian smiled and nodded. He retrieved a flask of wine, and encasing it in the power of the Great Path, sent it floating towards Lin Qiu. The flask came to a stop in front of him. Please, Futian said with a smile. Since a Renhuang had actively asked for a cup of wine, he would naturally not be stingy. It seemed that this Lin Qiu had a pretty straightforward personality. Thank you. Lin Qiu smiled in return. Popping open the wine flask, he raised it toward Futian and said, Dragon Submission Villa, Lin Qiu. Yi Lianyan. Futian raised his cup in response. As for what his identity was at that moment, even he was also unclear, and so he only introduced himself by his name. Even though Lin Qiu could not get any information of Futian's origins from his self-introduction, he did not mind it either. He swallowed the wine in one gulp. He felt that his body felt extremely comfortable as the powers of the Great Path coursed through his body. This is some great wine, he commended. Indeed, Futian was related to the alchemy emperor. He could taste that the wine came from a faction that refined elixirs. Lin Qiu thus thought that Futian should be the disciple of the alchemy emperor's junior. Let's all have a few drinks together. Futian passed the wine to Han Tai and Leng Yi as well. He appeared very generous. The Donglai goddess at the side took a look at him. Just how much quality wine did this rascal take from the eastern deity island? She thought to herself. He has been drinking it like water all this time on our trip, and yet there's still more. Now, he has even invited others to drink it with him as well. However, she did not really mind it. After all, the Dragon Submission Villa was not a minuscule faction. There was no harm in Futian making more friends. The Dongshao continent was vast, so it took them several days to traverse an endless distance and finally reach the main city of the Dongshao continent, Wangdu. When they arrived above Wangdu, they slowly descended from the air and traveled at a much lower distance above the city. Futian glanced at the city below him as he sat on the back of Black-Winged Condor. He saw numerous pavilions built on the ground. Among the people walking on the pavements and streets, saint-level practitioners were all too common. In fact, many of them were at the Renhuang level. They have finally arrived at Wangdu of the Dongxiao continent, one of the main continents in the Donghua domain. The arrival of an entire group of virtuosos drew the gaze of many people. These new arrivals had an extraordinary air about them. They seemed to be really strong. Even in Wangdu, they could still be considered to be very strong. However, their attention was short-lived. The people of Wangdu were not particularly curious. After all, there were numerous virtuosos in Wangdu, and from time to time, extraordinary people would come. The local practitioners were used to it. Yi Futian felt a little excited. He had already been in the Divine Prefecture for a couple of years. However, he had mostly been cultivating these few years. Now that he had come to the Dongxiao continent, he could finally be considered to be making contact with the core region of the Divine Prefecture. Next, he might be able to contact the major top-tier factions, and this contact might prove to be extremely relevant to everything that happened in the original realm. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. I only have the advantage of a higher cultivation level. This does not prove that I am more skilled than you, he politely replied. You two don't have to praise each other anymore, an alchemist at the side laughed. In this alchemy conference, the top 2 alchemists can be no one else but the 2 of you. Grandmaster he should be the first, Zhong Fan smiled and said. His generosity made him very likable. Having seen the 9 dragons elixir breath today, my horizons have really expanded. In the Donghua domain, it is tough to find a technique of a similar level, Grandmaster he replied. The 2 of them continued to commend each other. Since Grandmaster is the victor in this conference, would you like to practice this technique together? I would be able to seek your guidance in the future as well, Zhong Fan asked, extending an invitation to him. Since he was the victor of this alchemy conference, as long as he was willing to join the Alchemy Divine Palace, he would have the opportunity to learn this technique. Grandmaster the Alchemy Divine Palace needs you, an elderly person on the ancient mountain invited. Grandmaster he looked up into the ancient mountain and then lightly bowed in respect. It is my honor to join the Alchemy Divine Palace. Welcome, Grandmaster. Many people on the ancient mountain smiled. They had managed to persuade another alchemy grandmaster to join their ranks. Furthermore, this newcomer was one with significant potential. Welcome, Grandmaster a youth walked over and said with a smile. Seeing this man appear, everyone's eyes turned to him. He was the current top genius of the Alchemy Divine Palace, rumored to be the heir to the Palace Lord of the Alchemy Divine Palace, the future Palace Lord, Qi Mu. Looked at Qi Mu. He understood that this time the Alchemy Divine Palace had given him enough face. Qi Mu did not participate in the alchemy conference was because a chance had been given to him. They had wanted to invite him to join the Alchemy Divine Palace. With such courteous treatment from them, it would be a bit rude to still reject them. So, he chose to join the Alchemy Divine Palace. With Grandmaster joining our ranks, the Alchemy Divine Palace would certainly pull ahead of all other factions in the world of alchemy. All the powerful alchemists in the entire Donghua domain are now in among our ranks. What a joyous occasion! Qi Mu announced with a smile. The people around were all rather excited. The Alchemy Divine Palace definitely had huge ambitions. However, the Alchemy Divine Palace today certainly is not a faction that any other alchemy faction could even hope to compare to. How arrogant! A soft voice echoed out. Even though it was rather quiet, many people heard it, and those who did were looking around for the source of the voice. Qi Mu's gaze also turned toward the crowd. Many people voluntarily moved out of his line of sight. There are many alchemical masters in the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor on the Taiyuan continent, and they are not necessarily inferior to those of the Alchemy Divine Palace. Many of the cultivators of the Alchemy Divine Palace were looking at Lu Chuan. Although the names of Supreme Deity Donglai and Eastern Deity Island were still prestigious, they did not carry very much threat with them. Moreover, they were in Wangdu. One of the elders looked at Lu Chuan and said, "So, "Are you from the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor?" Upon hearing the old man's words, everyone gasped, and there was a slight commotion. The Tower of the Alchemy Emperor was one of the top alchemy forces of the Taiyuan continent. Its master was said to have extraordinary attainments in alchemy and was thus called the Alchemy Emperor. Now he had opened up a top alchemy force on the Taiyuan continent. It was said that the Alchemy Emperor was supreme deity Donglai's heir. Many people knew that the Alchemy Emperor often came to the Dongshao continent. Was this person who was the speaking one of the Alchemy Emperor's people? This was very interesting. What would happen if the people of the Alchemy Emperor and the Alchemy Palace met in the same place? Now it seemed that they would find out. "Yes," said Lu Chuan to the other man. The elder up in the sky smiled and said, "I have heard that the Alchemy Emperor was taught by supreme deity Donglai. The Alchemy Emperor is indeed powerful, but no one in the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor can take up his mantle. Other than him, the power of the other alchemists there is in doubt. As for Eastern Deity Island, I don't know much about them. Since you are a student of the Alchemy Emperor and have come here to this alchemy conference, why don't we test you? You and Zhong Fan create alchemy together, and we will see just how high level the alchemists of the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor are." He would not use his own alchemical power to bully Lu Chuan. After all, they were all people of status, and it would not be proper to use his power to bully someone weaker than him. Although Zhong Fan had previously lost to Zihe, he was still of a very high level of alchemy. Within the Alchemy Palace, there was no one other than Qi Mu who could overcome him. "I'll do it," said Zihe. "Since I entered the Alchemy Palace, that makes me a member of the palace. I have long heard the name of the Alchemy Emperor and have always wanted to have a chance to find out how powerful he is. Now that I have come across one of his disciples, why don't we find out whose alchemy is stronger?" "If Grandmaster Zihe is willing, then I have no objections," said the elder from the Alchemy Palace with a smile. Zihe was the foremost person at the alchemy conference, even stronger than Zhong Fan. Lu Chuan was silent. He knew his own alchemy level very well, and he was probably quite a bit weaker than Zihe. It would likely not be possible for him to defeat him. Chapter 1960, Show His Skills. Chapter 1960, Show His Skills. Yi Futian was stunned as well. He knew Beigong Shuang well enough to know that she was not really mocking anyone by saying this, she was just speaking to him. But cultivators had excellent hearing, and they could perceive everything she was saying. Thus, all the people watching from the mountain range around the Alchemy Divine Palace turned their gazes towards her. A look of surprise came into Beigong Shuang's eyes. She still wanted to question Yi Futian. After all, she had seen him perform alchemy, and these people here were far inferior to him. Even as a lower-level Renhuang, he was able to create pills that upper-level Renhuangs would desire. But from what they had heard, this place was the foremost alchemy holy land, and it was said that all the skilled alchemists in the Donghua domain were here. Thus, it must be that all the alchemists in the Donghua domain were weak. "Where are you from that you would dare speak so arrogantly?" The cultivator from Qinhe Palace unleashed the power of the Great Path, which fell directly upon Beigong Shuang. It was like an invisible hand was pressing down from the sky and grabbing the Great Path of space. This put Beigong Shuang under a great amount of pressure. Beigong Ao took a step forward, standing in front of Beigong Shuang. The Great Path of thunder swept out from him, and lightning flashed from his eyes, piercing towards his opponent. Their gazes locked. They were both of the 8th tier. An invisible aura swept out. "Do you have doubts about the arts of the Alchemy Divine Palace themselves? Or do you think the alchemists are simply too weak?" Zihe had crushed Lu Chuan in terms of his alchemy, but he still turned his gaze to Beigong Shuang when he heard her voice. The power of the Great Path seeped out from him. "What are you all doing?" said Lin Qiu, stepping forward and looking at all of them. "You all have said that the greatest alchemists of the Donghua domain are gathered here at the Alchemy Divine Palace. Since you are allowed to boast so, can she not also voice her opinion? Who are you?" Zihe's gaze fell upon Lin Qiu. "That is Lin Qiu of the Dragon Submission Mountain Range," said Zhong Fan from beside Zihe. He naturally recognized the other. The Dragon Submission Mountain Range was one of the top forces of the Dongshao continent. He had seen Lin Qiu in Wangdu before. Lin Qiu's people and the Alchemy Emperor's people were mingling together, obviously trying to make friends with each other. After all, who would not want to make friends with a powerful alchemy force? It was just like Qin He Palace and the Alchemy Divine Palace. Zihe looked at Lin Qiu. No wonder he had dared to walk out here. He was a member of the Lin family of Dragon Submission Mountain Range. The 3 lords of Dragon Submission Villa were all 9th-tier Renhuangs, so powerful that ordinary forces would not dare offend them. Of course, the Alchemy Divine Palace was not an ordinary force. People from the Dragon Submission Mountain Range and Tower of the Alchemy Emperor on the Taiyuan continent have come here today to cause trouble, it seems, said the old cultivator from the Alchemy Divine Palace who was standing up in the air. Or perhaps the alchemy masters of the Tower of the Alchemy Emperor want to continue testing themselves? We just happen to be passing through, answered Lin Qiu with a smile. Just passing through? Answered the man, turning his gaze to Beigong Shuang. Then what did what you just said mean? Beigong Shuang did not know what to say. She looked to Yi Futian, who said, if you want to say something, just say it. I had observed that your alchemy powers were rather commonplace and was asking why this was called the foremost holy land for alchemy in the Donghua domain. Are all the alchemists in the Donghua domain so unskilled? Asked Beigong Shuang, but she was a little doubtful. Was it possible that she was mistaken, for she had only seen Yi Futian perform alchemy before? Perhaps he was just extraordinarily skilled? However, hadn't Yi Futian just barely learned alchemy? Although he was very talented, for him to already be better than them would be impossibly quick. And these people were known as the best alchemy holy land in the Donghua domain. Why did she feel there was such a large gap between their alchemy and Yi Futian's? Previously, on Eastern Deity Island, Yi Futian had casually made alchemical pills that were far beyond his level. Although the ones he had created when he had first started were not the finest quality, they were still quite good. The ignorant speak their minds without fear. This is truly shameless talk, came an elder's cold voice. He looked at Beigong Shuang and said, since you think our alchemy is weak, let us see how good yours is. No, I will not, responded Beigong Shuang. Her words stunned everyone. Many of them smiled. She said no? Yet she mocked the alchemical ability of the Alchemy Divine Palace? You say you won't show us your alchemy, and yet you dare mock us? Zihe's gaze pierced through Beigong Shuang. But he will. Beigong Shuang turned to Yi Futian, shocking him. Was she selling him out? Suddenly, everyone's gaze turned upon Yi Futian, including Lu Chuan and the other cultivators who followed the Alchemy Emperor. Yi Futian had previously said that he did not understand alchemy, that he was only a beginner at it, but now, Beigong Shuang said he would show them his alchemy. Did this mean that Yi Futian was actually skilled at alchemy? Otherwise, Beigong Shuang would not have said anything. Are you a disciple of the Alchemy Emperor as well? Zihe asked him. No, I'm not, said Yi Futian with a shake of the head. Since your friend has seen fit to mock us, why don't you go ahead and show us how good your alchemy is, said Grandmaster Zihe. However, the alchemy level being performed here at the Alchemy Conference was rather low up till now. Thus, you all must not have been performing up to your usual standards. Everyone was plunged into silence when they heard Yi Futian's words. His mocking tone left them all speechless. They had asked Yi Futian to show his skills to them. Now that he had done so, would the Alchemy Divine Palace be satisfied? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.